Zok to Helig Gemara. With Matzah Sukkos, we're learning Daf Nan Hey and Amdun Vav, which are the two letter for Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. Our learning should be a schus for Shalema, for Avram Tuvia, and Carmela Yosefa, and our learning should be a schus for our dear brothers in Eretz Yisrael in this terrible Eis Tzar. Rabban Yisrael Shav Rachmanis on Klal Yisrael. Tanan Hasan, we learned over there. Behema shenimtzes Yerushalayim l'migdalader, a behema that was found wandering somewhere in between Yerushalayim and Migdalader, uchamidas l'chov, and that same radius, which is probably less than a mile, based on where Migdalader seems to be near Beis Lechem, that radius all the way around Yerushalayim, if you found an animal, chances are it wandered out of Yerushalayim, and most of the babies in Yerushalayim were karbonis. So therefore, we have to assume it's a carbon. Now the question is how we treat it, what do we do with it? Zok to Gemara, Zok to Mishnah, Zechorim, if it's a male animal found, oilos, you bring them as a carbon oila. The kevas, if they're female animals, zivle shlomim, you bring them as a carbon shlom. Frag the Gemara, Ela Zacharim, oilos who they have a zivle shlom layavu. A zachar animal could be a shlomim. So how do you know that it's an oila? To be makrabit as an oila? Maybe it's a shlomim. Or my boishia, hacha beva locha b'tmeim askinan. Avada, we're not suggesting that the actual animal you makrabit as an oila, because it might not be an oila. But it's a person who said, I'm going to take this animal for myself, and I'm going to be mechayiv myself to pay or to provide replacement animals for any possibility of what this carbon would have been. So if it's a suffix of a shlomim and an oila, then you'll have two animals, and you'll say, if the animal that I'm replacing was an oila, then this animal should be an oila instead of it. And the shlomim that I'm bringing is tamanadava. But if the animal that I found was actually a shlomim, then the shlomim will be the replacement, and the oila will be the nedava. If you find that it's a zohar, then you have to be concerned that not only might it be a shlomim, like for an akeva, but it might also be an oila, and therefore you have to set aside two karbanos. If Reb Meir, it would go contrary to Reb Meir. The Amar, hektish b'mezid mischala. Rabbi Yehuda taught us that you can't knowingly and willingly take away the kedusha of hektish and redeem it with money. It's only Reb Meir who says that this is a possibility. So this would only be consistent with Reb Meir. Okay, but the kabayis, I understand, here you have a carbon that has kedushas aguf. Did Reb Meir say there as well that when you redeem it for money, that it goes l'chulin? We learned, what Tanami learned, ein moyel achem moyel b'mukdoshin ela b'behema uv'chlisharis b'lvad. The only time you can have multiple me'ilos is only by a behema and chlisharis. Because normally when you're moyel in hektish, like in bedek habayis, it goes l'chulin. So you can't be moyel again because now it's already chulin. But by a behema or by chlisharis, there it does not go l'chulin, and therefore. You cannot be moyel. Therefore, you could be moyel like a moyel. As the Mishnah continues to illustrate, Ketzad, how you were riding a behema that was a carbon. You're moyel. Because it never went to chulin. Same thing if someone is being moyel by using a keli of the Beis Hamikdash, a klisharis. How you show yourself b'koshel zov, v'chaver v'shasa. So Zok to Gemara, how could you tell me there Meir holds, like the original price on top, that you could just swap out the carbon for money? You can't take the kedusha off an animal. So how does this whole thing work? Zok to Gemara, Hahi Rabbi Yudhi. This Mishnah that we just quoted that said you cannot be Machal Kedushas Aguf. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir might disagree with that. And Rashi says it's mistaber that it's Rabbi Yehuda. Because we're talking about ein moya lachem moya. Me'ila means you bring a carbon asham me'ilas. Everybody agrees that a carbon asham me'ilas is only brought for a shogig. It's for sure not brought for a mazid. Because the Torah says beferish, b'shkaga. You only bring a carbon asham me'ilas b'shkaga. So it's speaking b'shogig, and that's where we're discussing the me'ilah. According to Rav Meir, even b'mezid, actually b'shogig doesn't work. Okay, Zog to Gemara. So it's going to go to Rabbi Yehuda. And Ha Reb Meir, and the original Brisa that talks about being mischal, the carbon that you found, was going to go to Reb Meir. Frank to Gemara, I don't understand. Midi Rabbi Yehuda, Nishmal Reb Meir. We know there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Meir, whether or not b'mezid, if you try to be machal hektish, if it'll work. But you don't find anywhere that they're arguing about a new thing, like whether or not you could be machal kedushas aguf. So how could you just make this into a machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir? So the Gemara says, "Frek the Gemara, Midi Rabbi Yehuda, Nishmal Rabbi Meir." From the fact that we see something that Rabbi Yehuda says, that we have no reason to assume that Rabbi Meir disputes that halacha. They should tell us that Rabbi Meir holds the same halacha. Lav Omer Rabbi Yehuda. Didn't Rabbi Yehuda tell us that hektish b'shoyig mischal? He holds that you could only be mischal hektish b'shoyig. But he said, as an aside, kedushas aguf, a carbon loy mischal. That has nothing to do to his discussion. It's a side point that kedushas aguf, a carbon, you can never be mischal. Well, then the Rabbi Meir Nami, according to Rabbi Meir as well, afal gav the hektish b'mezid mischal. Yes, he argues in one nakuda. He argues with Rabbi Yehuda. He argues that he holds hektish you could be michal b'mezid. But where do you see that he should argue on an accepted halacha that Rabbi Yehuda said? Avagav the hektish b'mezid mischalel kedushas aguf lo mischalel. Rabbi Meir would also agree that the kedushas aguf, like a carbon, you can't stam be mischalel. So we're at the bottom of Daf Nun Hey Amar Aleph. Zok to Gemara, Hasam Loikem Mechavan Afukin. You know where we assume that everybody agrees that you can't be machalo the kedusha of a carbon? B'shoyig. Rabbi Yehuda talking b'shoyig. B'shoyig, you never had an intention to be moil. You didn't know it was active. There, you won't be able to be mafkiyat l'chul. But Hacha, in your Meir's case, where we're discussing someone who's lahedja, trying to take the kedusha off this carbon, so Hacha kamechaven lafukina l'chul. That's what he's focused on doing. So maybe there is different. And there, Rabbi Meir would hold, in fact, that you could be mafkiyat the kedusha, which will then explain the right, so we quoted right at the beginning why, if you found a carbon, you're able to take the kedusha off of it. Zok to Gemara, Amar deshamas leiler Rab Meir b'kotche kotche. Maybe dafka b'kotche kotche we could do this. B'kodeshim kala mi shamas lei. Who said the kodeshim kala like if it's a shlomin? Who said you could just take the kedusha off it? Amar lehu meir abonim b'biakav shemei kal v'chomer. Kotche kotche mischalin madich you could take the kedusha off kotche kotche. Like Bedek Abayis, like an Oila, Kaddish and Kalim, which is a lesser level of Kedusha, like calls again, surely Reb Meir would hold that you could take the Kedusha off of that. And it Mornami, Amar Abchama, Arkiva, Amar Yosy Bachadina, Amar Hoyer Reb Meir. Reb Meir used to say, Hektish b'mezid mischalo, b'shagi again mischalo. And then he said, Beferish, Echot Kotche Kotchim, Echot Kodeshim Kalim, Kal v'chomer, kotche mischalin, kodeshim kalim like kol shekain. Beautiful. So you have over here a beautiful brisa going to go to a mayor who says that hektish yimachalel amazing and it works side by kodesh kachim, side by kodesh kalim. And Yehuda says that kedusha is good. You can never be mischal, but that's only b'shageg. Okay, gewaltig. Let's turn over onto Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis. Toiba Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, Kashi, didn't understand. You find an animal that's wandering outside of Yerushalayim. You assume it's a carbon, and you want to solve the problem so you're not hearing a song. So you're telling someone to go do an Aveira of Megillah B'Hekdesh. Toy Bar Rabbi Yochanan, V'chi Ayim Loyla Adam Amoid V'Chatei V'Shul Shetiska. So you want to be a hero and fix the problem. So because of that, you should be mazed, be machalo kedusha of a carbon. That's 100% awesome. That's not allowed. So oibazoi, how is it that we can tell them that this is what we should do to deal with the problems by being machal the kedusha of this carbon onto moish? You're not allowed to do that. Ela Omer Rabbi Yochanan, let me tell you what the price means. Avada doesn't mean while it's a tam, while it's a kosher carbon, while it's right to be brought in the mizbeach, that you should be mechaled on them. Avada not. What we're telling you to do is mamtin la achatuma. Wait until this animal gets a mum. Now the chatchila is a mitzvah to be paid, but you don't know if you're being paid in the oila that has a mum or if you're being paid a shlom that has a mum. And therefore, if this animal that has a mum is an oila, then this carbon should be an oila, and this other animal which I'm bringing as a shlomim should be an adava. But if it turns out that the animal that got a mum that I found is a shlomim, then I want this shlomim to replace it. This other animal that I'm bringing as an oila is going to be an oila as an adava. We learned that if it's a male animal that's found, you have to be choshed that it might be a shlomim, you have to be choshed that it might be an oil. Frank Gemara, there's a third possibility. Dilma taida, maybe it's a carbon taida. Zok Gemara, you're right. You'd have to have a third animal there as well. The maisinami taida. Frank Gemara, but you can't stop bringing a taida. Taida needs lechem. Vaboy lechem. Zok Gemara, the maisinami lechem. You bring lechem. And once again, you say, if this was a taida, then this should be the taida. If it wasn't a taida, then this taida should be a taida as nadava, because a carbon taida you can bring as a nadava. Frank Gemara, fine, but v'dilma oshamu, maybe it's an osham. For that, you can't make this tonight because you can't bring an osham nadava. Zok Gemara, we don't have to be worried about that because osham ben shtei, and osham is only a carbon. You can only bring for an osham a carbon that's at least 2 years old. Vishtakach, and the story in this Mishnah about an animal that was found, it was ben shana. It was only a year old, so it couldn't have been an asham. Could have only been oila, shlamim, or a toida. Frank Tomar v'dilma asham mitzayruhu or asham nazaruhu, and Rashi tells us that both these carbonis actually are also animals that are less than a year old. B'nei shana. Zot Gemara lo yishchich. They're very uncommon carbonis. So when you find a carbon, you assume it's from the roiv, which would either be typically an oila, a shlamim, or a taida. We don't need to be worried that maybe this was an asham of a mitzvah or nazar. It's not like. Frank tomorrow v'dilma Pesach. Maybe it's a carbon Pesach. Tomorrow Pesach bismanai misusi. First of all, if it's Pesach time, if it's Erev Pesach, people are very careful and protective over their carbonis. So it's highly unlikely that what you're finding here is a Pesach. Mizra Zahiri Bey. The Shaloi Bismanai, and if it's not Pesach time, and this is a carbon that was lost a while ago, well, in Shlamim, it has the same malach as a Shlamim, which we have that suffix here. Maybe it's Bechor Meiser. What's the problem? What do you do with a Bechor or Meiser that has a mum? It goes l'chum and you eat it. No. Anyway, we're not touching it until it gets a mum. You tell me you're only allowed to eat it once it has a mum. These animals that you found, you wait till they get a mum anyway. So there's no concern. Amamar. Let's look at the other case in this Mishnah. In the Keva is Zivchei Shlam. If it's in the Keva, we don't need to worry that it's an Oila, because an Oila cannot be in the Keva. So it must be a Shlam. The same question we asked before. So that's the word, the Maisi Taida. Yes, the Maisi Nami Lechem. The Doma Chatasi. And the Keva could be a carbon Chatas. For a Chatas, you don't have this whole solution, because a chatos you can't bring b'dedova. So tomorrow, then the cave that we're talking about is not a bashnosa. A chatos has to be bashnosa. You can only bring a carbon chatos if it's a 1-year-old carbon or less. But the animal that we found was bashtei shanim. So now it's a very big ukimta. The zachar that you found was only a year old. And the cave that you found was 2 years old. Therefore, it couldn't have been a chatos. Maybe it was a chatos that when the bailam made it into a chatos, it was a good chatos. It was young, but it wasn't brought, and it was left until it got too old. And now it's already one of the chatos amesais. You have to lock it up. It's very uncommon that should happen. What happened to the shtakach bashnos? What if you actually found an animal that was bashnosa, a female? So it might actually be a chatos. What do you do with it? The tomorrow, in fact, you wouldn't have this eitzah. You would not be able to make a tanai with other kabbalas because it might be a chatos. So what do you do with it? Tanya Chananya ben Chachinoi Omer Eiz bashnosa lechatos. You bring it as a chatos. In fact, tomorrow the chatos lokadaitoch might not be a chatos. You treat it like it was a chatos, which is koitzel l'kipa b'meisa me'ela. You lock it up in a room, you don't feed it, and you let it die because it could possibly be a chatos, and for a chatos, there's no solution. Tanuraban. Ein loichin behema b'mais ma'asher. You don't buy behemoths with mois ma'asher sheni. You never buy a behema with mois ma'asher sheni. I want to stop for one moment because somebody wanted to join just for the second block. And I told him he should join at 9:15. But in fact, we're at 9 o'clock and we're ready. So I just want to message him. Okay. Zog to Helu Gumar. Tanu Rabbanu. Ein loichin behema b'mois ma'asher sheni. You're not allowed to buy a behema, a kosher behema, with mois ma'asher sheni. And Rashi gives 2 reasons. When you're going up to Yerushalayim, you have Paris, you don't want to schlep Paris. So what you do is you redeem it with money. It says hakesef b'yadeh. Money is what you bring up to Yerushalayim. Animals are not things that you could buy with mois meiser. Once you're in Yerushalayim, you can buy animals to eat in Yerushalayim, but you can't buy them when you're trying to consolidate into money, so it's easier to bring up to Yerushalayim. The other thing Rashi says is because it's going to cause a loss to meiser, because you're going to buy an animal and you're going to schlep it up to Yerushalayim, it's likely to lose weight on the way up. It'll become weaker. That's not good. So therefore, ein loichin behema b'mois ma'asher sheni. You're not allowed to buy a behema with money of ma'asher sheni. Turning on to Daf Nun Vav Amar Aleph. Vim lokach. What if you wrongfully and you were over and you bought a behema out of Yerushalayim with mois ma'asher sheni? B'shoigig yachzeru damim l'mchem. If you did it b'shoigig, zok Rashi to mekach tos. Nobody would want to buy an animal that he has to now schlep up from some other city up to Yerushalayim. It's definitely a mekach tos, and therefore yachzeru damim l'mchem. He can give the money. He can give the animal back and receive a full refund, because we say that the whole purchase was a mekach tos. But b'mezid, what if he knew what he was doing and he wanted to buy an animal to bring up to Yerushalayim? Kala, the mecher is valid, v'toichel b'moked, and he'll have to schlep this animal up to Yerushalayim. He has no choice. He doesn't have to schlep the animal to Yerushalayim. Omer Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda came along and said, Amed Dvar Mamurim, where do you say that by Mazid he could just talav et toichel b'makoim, the sale is valid? That is b'mischavin v'lokach chila l'shem shlom. He bought a behema tahira, and he had in mind to bring it as a carbon shlomim up in Yerushalayim, of course. V'otap is shlomim. So Rashi, because we learned from Psukim that when you buy an animal with mois, mais, or sheni, you're supposed to bring it as a carbon shlomim. And we learned it from a drasha, because by meiser it says v'achaltem sham, and it says v'zavach l'shlomim v'achalta sham. So from the Gzer Shavav Sham, we learned that what type of meat should you purchase with Mois Ma'asheni in Yerushalayim, carbon shlom. You should buy yourself a carbon shlom. So if that's what he had in mind, and it's b'mischaven, it works, as the Rashi told us a moment ago. Talev v'soichal b'mokai. Avol b'mischaven lahoitzi Mois Ma'asheni l'chulin. What if he had no intention of taking this animal to Yerushalayim? He wanted to buy it, let the vendor be stuck with his moist ma'aser sheni. He'll take this animal and he'll eat it here, in whichever city he's in. That's very wrong. There been shogig ben mezid yachsru damam. There, regardless, the sale is null and void. And why is it? Rashi explains. Well, if it's a shogig, then it's not what we're talking about. But shogig is always a mekatos. But if it's mezid, so Rashi, it's impossible that the seller didn't have a whiff of what was going on. He must have known that he's getting Ma'aser Sheni money, and he's selling a guy an animal that he's going to violate the terms of the Ma'aser Sheni, and he's going to eat the animal, not in Yerushalayim. So therefore, we actually sanction the seller, and we make him take it back. We make him give a refund, a full refund, and we reverse the sale. Frank the Gemara, we learned that the Yehuda holds when it comes to Mois Ma'aser Sheni, and Yehuda the amazing Kiddush. Even if you want to be Mekadosh a woman with Mois Ma'aser Sheni, which is not allowed, if you do it, it's a good Kiddushin. Why don't you have the same problem? That she's going to have that Mois Ma'aser Sheni, and she's going to not use it properly. So we should sanction them. And we should say that it's not a good Kiddushin. She's to give back the money. So to Gemara, I'll tell you. Omar Belozer, there's no concern here. Because Isha Yodas, She'ein Mois Ma'aser Sheni Mischal Al Yom. She knows that this transaction doesn't work. Which means that when she receives the money, it still remains and retains its Kedushas Ma'aser Sheni. So when she accepted the money, she knowingly took Mois Ma'aser Sheni. And therefore, her intention was, I'll take it to Yerushalayim. Yes, it's a hassle. Yes, it's difficult. But that's what he's giving me. I'm accepting it. But I'm not going to abuse the Ma'aser Sheni. I'm going to use it properly. But the vendor who is selling this animal illegally, he's not going to treat the Ma'aser Sheni properly. And that's why he's sanctioned. But a woman is not going to be sanctioned, because we'll assume she knows what's going on. Hear me out. So you're telling me that if the vendor chaps what's going on, and he knows that the money that he's receiving is Ma'aser Sheni, we don't have to worry? So you tell me, when the vendor sold the animal, he would mistakenly think that the Kedusha transferred to the animal, and his money is scot-free, when it really has a Kedusha's Ma'aser Sheni, and therefore we have to sanction him to give it back. But in a case where the vendor for sure knows that what he's receiving is Ma'aser Sheni, are you telling me there we don't sanction? And that's why the Kiddushin is a Kiddushin? I'm going to give you an example of a case where surely the vendor selling knows that the money that he's getting is Mois Ma'aser, yet we still sanction. And where's that case? Maskav Lo Rabbi Yirmiyah. Very behemoth Tameya. Everybody knows you cannot buy Ma'aser Sheni. With Ma'aser Sheni, you cannot purchase a behemoth Tameya. Or Avodim, or Karkois. The Adim Yodea, everybody knows, She'ein Mois Ma'aser Sheni Mischal Naleh. If you buy a behemoth Tameya with Mois Ma'aser Sheni, the money remains mois ma'aser sheni. The transaction doesn't work. Yet, Utanan we learned, ein loichin be'emet tamei avodim v'rachoyis b'mois ma'aser sheni, afilu b'Yerushalayim, even in Yerushalayim. And the punchline is, if he did that, we sanction. And what is the sanction? Not that the sale gets reversed, but we sanction that the buyer thinks now that he unloaded his money, that was Ma'aser Sheni, and he received an animal. No, you now have to go find other money, and you have to say, wherever the money is that I gave the seller of the animal, the Kedushas Ma'aser Sheni should come off that money, and it should be chal on this money. So he's stuck. He still has the Mois Ma'aser Sheni in his position. So I'll call upon him. Here we sanction. We're saying the vendor would know that what he got was Mois Ma'aser Sheni, and he'll treat it with respect accordingly. Meaning he'll only take it to Yerushalayim to eat it. So why are we sanctioning the lakech here? Zok Gemara, the teretz is because the average person doesn't know. The person who sold the Ben B'Tameya doesn't know. And therefore we have to sanction because we're afraid that he's going to use the Mois Ma'aser Sheni improperly. And even the women don't know. So why is it a good Kiddushin in our Mishnah? Because our Mishnah, we're making a Nukimta speaking about a very specific type of woman. We're speaking about a woman who is very learned. And she is some of the few women who know the halachas of Ma'aser Sheni. And she will know that the money that she received from this man who was Mekadosh has the Kedusha of Ma'aser Sheni, and therefore she has to treat it accordingly. And that's why in our Mishnah we don't sanction. But a regular person who was Mekadosh, a regular woman with Mois Ma'aser Sheni, in fact, even Rabbi Yehuda holds, it would not work. The Yoda, she knows that it's Mois Ma'aser Sheni that has to be treated accordingly. Shlomi, I apologize. We got to Daf Nun Vav a little earlier, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to go back to the beginning of Nun Vav. It's a Geshmak of blood anyway, so I'm going to go back to the beginning of Nun Vav. And I hope Rav Benzi will be moichel me that we're going to get another Geshmak Chazorah of this Daf. So let's go back to the bottom of Nun Hey Amud Beis. And the Gemara says at the bottom of Nun Hey Amud Beis, I'm just going to turn the Daf. The bottom of the Nun Hey Amud Beis says as follows: Tanu Rabbanon, second to the bottom line. Ein loichin behema b'mois ma'aser sheni. You're not allowed to buy a behema with mois ma'aser sheni. And Rashi gives two reasons. One is it says v'tzarta kesef yodecha. What you do with ma'aser sheni out of Yerushalayim is you consolidate it into coins, and you take coins up. You don't take animals up. The other reason is if you try taking an animal up, you know what's going to happen? It's going to get weaker. It loses weight. When you walk to Yerushalayim, you lose weight. It's good exercise. And we don't want the animal to be diminished. And therefore, you're not supposed to buy an animal with mois ma'aser sheni. In Yerushalayim, yes, you can buy animals to eat, but not in other places. The Im, Zok to Gemara, turning on to Amar Allah. If someone violated this halacha and bought an animal anyway, Zok to Gemara, V'im lokach, b'shoigig, if he didn't know that it was mois ma'aser sheni, the whole thing was a mistake. Yachsu dam l'mkayma. It's a mekatos. He gets his money back and he gives the animal back because he would have never used mois ma'aser sheni to buy an animal because now it creates a huge pain in the neck for him. Now he has to schlep his donkey. So he had to schlep this sheep up with him. Nobody wants to do that. It was clearly a mistake. But the amazing, what if he no longer did it? I want this animal. I want to eat this animal in Yerushalayim. Then Tala, then the mecher works. And exactly what he intended to do. They'll have to take it up to Yerushalayim and eat it there. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, this that we say that b'mezid, the sale is valid, and he just eats it in Yerushalayim, is b'mischavim. It's where he had kavana to do what he was doing, but v'lokar tchila l'shem shlomim. He bought this animal as a carbon shlomim. Because Rashi tells us that when you buy meat with mois ma'aser sheni, you're only supposed to buy a carbon shlomim with. And we learned it from Exer Shava. It says V'chaltam Sham by Ma'aser Sheni. It says V'zavachta Shlam and V'chalta Sham. So from Sham we learn that the type of meat you buy with Mois Ma'aser Sheni is Shlama meat. So if that's what he did, he just bought it in a different city other than Yerushalayim, we let the sale go through. That's what he wanted. But what if his intention was to buy an animal and eat it not in Yerushalayim and not a korban? That's completely invalid, and therefore ben shoygig ben mezid yachsru davam kaimam. We reverse the sale. So b'shoygig, it's obvious why we reverse the sale to make achtos. But why would we reverse the sale by a mezid? Zok Rashi, we sanction the seller. The seller must have sniffed out that this guy was doing something wrong, giving him mois ma'aser sheni, and he thought maybe that the kedusha goes onto the animal, and he knows that this guy is going to be violating. Because of that, we sanction him and we force him to reverse the sale. Zok to Gemara, v'anan tanan. How could you say that? Because Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Mezid Kiddush, Rabbi Yehuda said in our Mishnah, if you knowingly take Ma'aser Sheni and you are Makadosh a woman with it, which is 100% not allowed, so that's literally doing exactly what that case is, where you're knowingly abusing Ma'aser Sheni and you're giving it to this woman. And we don't sanction, there we say it's a good Kedushin. Why don't we sanction and we reverse the Kedushin? Amar Belazar, you know why? Because this doesn't work. The money retains its status of Ma'aser Sheni. If it does, then Yoidas, Isha Yoidas, the average woman knows, She'ein Mois Ma'aser Sheni Mischal Al Yod. The average woman knows that if she's receiving Mois Ma'aser Sheni for her Kedushin, it will retain its Kedushin. It won't lose its Kedushin. And therefore, we're not concerned that something bad will happen, because she'll treat it with the proper respect for Ma'aser Sheni. She will actually take this money and only buy food in Yerushalayim and eat it there. And therefore we don't sanction, because there's no great travesty will come out of it, because she's going to do the proper thing with it. But the moicher, he thinks that his money is free and clear. And he thinks that the Kedusha went onto the animal. And meanwhile, he has money that's Ma'aser Sheni. He's going to use it locally. That's a disaster. Therefore, we have to sanction him to take that money away from him and reverse the sale. Frag to Gemara, are you telling me that whenever you know for sure that the vendor is going to be aware that he's receiving Mois Ma'aser Sheni and he accepts it, are you telling me there you don't sanction? I'm going to give you an example of a case where the vendor knows he's receiving improperly Mois Ma'aser Sheni and we don't sanction him. Maskav lo Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Behema Tameya, Avodim v'Karkayos. The Adam Yoidea Shein Mois Ma'aser Sheni Mischal Alei. Everybody knows with Mois Ma'aser Sheni you cannot buy a Behema Tameya even in Yerushalayim. You can't buy Avodim, you can't buy Karkayos. What Tanan we learned in Lochim Behema Tameya Avodim v'Karkayos Mois Ma'aser Sheni Afilam Yerushalayim. V'im Lokach that you sanction Yoichel Kenegda. We sanction. Now this is not the same sanction as what we were discussing before, that they reversed the sale, which really is sanctioning the seller. Here we're sanctioning the buyer. What does Yoichel Kenegda mean? What it means is that let's say I took $500 of Mois Ma'aser Sheni and I bought an Evid with it. So now I think, great, I have an Evid and he's stuck with the Mois Ma'aser Sheni. No, you got to now pull out another $500 of cash from your bank account, and you got to say, wherever the Moicher has that money, that's the Ma'aser Sheni, it should be chal on my $500 cash. So he's right back where he started from, except that now he has a union employee working for him. He has this Evid. So he's further behind. So you see, you do sanction. Why do you sanction? If the fellow accepted the mois, knowing that it was Ma'aser Sheni, just like the woman, he'll know to treat it properly and eat it only in Yerushalayim. So because of that, we're aborting that tzvar. And we're saying people don't know. We have to assume people are ignorant and they don't know, and they're going to abuse the Ma'aser Sheni, and therefore you must sanction. So why in our Mishnah don't we sanction? Why is it a good Kedushin? Because we're not speaking about any old woman. We're talking about a BJJ girl. A BJJ girl, the Yada. She knows about Ma'aser Sheni, and she knows that she'll have to treat it properly. Only for her will it be a good Kedushin. But anybody else who might not know that, we have to assume that they'll abuse it. Develop it. That explains this brisa. So what we're saying is that the case of someone who abused Meiser Sheni, there's a sanction, and we only sanction if we assume it's going to be abused. But if we know it's not going to be abused, and the Meiser will be treated properly, we don't sanction. Now let's look at these different sanctions. In the case of someone who bought a baby tomato with it, there we don't sanction by reversing the sale. We force the buyer, the lekeach, to put up another bulk of money and put the kedusha on it. Why don't you make the same sanction like we had earlier when you bought an animal in Chutz La'aretz? Not in Chutz La'aretz, out of Yerushalayim, where you just reverse the sale. Zok Amar Shmuel, you know why you couldn't do that sanction? Because it's speaking Kishaborach. The lekeach had a pop-up store, and he's out of business. When you go back to the store to have him reverse it, he's not there anymore. So therefore, we have no choice but to sanction the lekeach. We cannot sanction the moicher. Zok to Gemara, okay, so you're telling me that really your first person you're going to target is the moicher and not the lekeach? Why is that? But time of the barach. The only reason why you're sanctioning the lekeach is because the moicher ran away. Who did the bad? Who's the bad guy here? The lekeach, the bad guy. Yes, the moicher is an accessory to the crime, but the lekeach did the crime. So why do you sanction the moicher? So tomorrow, you know why? Because lav achbar ganov, elachur ganov. My wife ordered a pair of shoes for my son on the Erev Yom Tov, and it arrived through Amazon on Shabbos. We saw it on my front porch. Motzei Yom Tov, it's not there anymore. Whose fault is it? The Ganav? No, it's my fault. Lav achbar ganav, elachur ganav. You put an Amazon package out there, you had to sit there for 3 days. You're asking for trouble. So that's what it means. Lav achbar ganav, elachur ganav. The hole which allowed the achbar to hide what he finds, that's causing the problem. So the lekeach, he would never have bought this animal if he wouldn't have found a moicher to sell it to. Zokter, this makes no sense. I don't understand. Just because I'm a seller, if no one wanted to buy, they would want to be no available. So why are you holding it accountable to me? The answer is Zokter very simple. Somebody once interviewed a bank robber, and he asked the bank robber, "Sir, why do you rob banks?" So the bank robber said, "What else should I rob? That's where the money is. What do you want me to rob? A pickle stand? I robbed the bank, so that's where the money is." The Zokter Gemara Mistavra, where's the money? If the money is by the moicher, that's where we sanction. Give that money back. If the moicher is gone, so then we have no choice, so we go to the lekeach. So it's no longer the svar of Ganov. In fact, they're both guilty. Rather, you go where the money is. Wherever you see the money of Isser, that's what we deal with. Gewaltig. Zok, the Nai Mishnah, the Heilige Mishnah, a new subject. Isurei Ano. HaMakadosh, if you're Makadosh, which is Isurei Ano, it's not a good Kiddushin, and the Mishnah lists off a whole bunch of examples of Isurei Ano. So, Arla, that's a fruit that grows the first 3 years. Klai HaKerem, when you planted other things in a Kerem. Shor Nisko is a shor that was condemned to death. There's many reasons why. We're going to focus on the Shor Nisko because it killed somebody. And there was a Shor Mu that killed somebody, then the Shor gets killed. Even though it's a Shor Tama gets killed. But there's no Kaifer. Egla Rufa. Egla Rufa is, if we don't know which city the murderer was from, the closest city to the corpse takes a calf and knocks its head off with an axe from behind, and this is done on a dry riverbed. That animal is also banam. There's a process of a mitzvah becoming tar. 2 birds are brought at first. 1 bird is brought as a carbon, the other one is let free. Those birds are also banam. Ubesar nazir. A nazir grows his hair long. When he cuts his hair, he can't sell it to a sheitel macher. That's also banam. Upetach chamor. Someone who's not poida. A firstborn chamor is also banah. Ubasa b'cholov. If someone cooks basar and cholov together, it's also banah. But chulun shenishchadu bazar, or chulun that was shafted in the azar is also banah as well. And therefore, if you're mekadesh with any of these isur anah, ain't a mekudeshes.
Yossi, just yes, the Egla Rufa and the Tzipuri Mitzvah are when they're alive or when they're already geshachten and you're just dealing with the meats.
That's going to be the discussion of the Gemara.
Okay.
So it's a very good point. Machra. What if you sold this Isur Einah? So basically you're a scam artist because you sold it and now you get money which is free and clear and then he's left holding the bag. Or maybe not. Maybe if you try selling it, maybe the Isur transfers over to the money that you get. So Machra and V'Kiddush B'Dmei and Mikudeshes. It would be Mikudeshes, which tells you that the Isur Einah does not transfer to the money. So if you sell it, you scam the guy who bought it because he's stuck with Isur Einah, but your money is free and clear. Zaktamar ba'arla minola. How do you know that arla is asher banu? The Tanya we learned in the pasuk. Let's look at the Torah Or HaShalim. It says v'chisivayu el haaretz u'netatem koletz meichel. Now there's a funny lashon here. Va'araltem or losoi es period. Very weird lashon. Then it says shalosh shanim yilachem arelim lo yayach. So we know you don't need it. What is this funny lashon? Zok to Gemara. The Tanya arelim lo yayach. Ainli ala yisur achila. I would only know in achila. Hano minayin shelo yehenem. How do you know you're not even allowed to have a nocham? If it's a fruit that you could make a dye out of, you're not allowed to use it as a dye. You're not allowed to use it as an oil. You can't use it to light candles. You can have a nocham. Beautiful. We know there's also about them. By Klaya Kerem, the pasuk says, "Pen tiktash hamalaya." Maybe what grows will become tiktash. What does tiktash mean? So Chizkiah, it's a combination of two words, pen tukad h. It might have to be burnt. In other words, it might have to be destroyed, meaning it's also badam. Bashi Amar, no, you read it pen yakaidish, might be hektish. That's why it's also a no like hektish. For Gemara, the Israel of hektish is a little bit different because you could be pointed. Ima kaidish toifus is damo, but the yoytzal l'chulin. Are you suggesting af klaya cherem, toifus is damo v'yoytzal l'chulin? You could redeem it. Our Mishnah says if you sold it, it doesn't get redeemed, and in fact it remains also and the money's mutter. We have to go back to Chizkiah's chat that it's pen tukaresh becomes. It has to just be destroyed. It has to be incinerated. Shar nisko. Minayin. How do you know Shar nisko is also no the Tanya? Mimashma shenemar. Let's look at the pasuk inside. The chiyiga shar is isha of a mace. Sakar yisakar ashar. The shar has to be stoned. That means it's an avela. Straight. You can't eat it. So the pasuk says v'lo you can't eat the meat. Well, why would I think you could eat the meat? It's an avela. Uval ashar. That's right. So zok to Gemara. Sakar yisakar ashar. Mimashma shenemar sakar yisakar ashar. Any idea shenaveli? I can figure out on my own that it's nevela. Why did the Torah have to tell us? I could have known it because it's a nevela. So the fact that the Torah repeated lo yachlos b'sarai is teaching us magidlach shem shachtu la'achashinik martina. Imagine Bezdin Paskin that this guy's ox is going to be stoned. He doesn't want to take a total loss, so he runs quickly to shecht it so that it shouldn't be a nevela. How do you know that if you try doing that, it's still aser be'achila? You know from a yoyachos b'sar. Even if after it was condemned, you quickly shechted it, so it didn't get stoned. That's also going to be aser. B'hanaminayin. How do you know the shar and niskal is aser in hana as well? Talmud Leimer uval hashar noki. Those are the extra three words at the end of the apostle. My mashma, how do you see the mubal ashor naki that the fire is also bana? So tomorrow Shimon ben Zayim Aimer ka'adam shaimer lechaveiroi yatsa ploini naki min chasa. This guy was wiped clean. He has no benefit of anything. So that's how you know it's also bana. Frank the Gemara, mimai. how do you know the high lo yachal spesarai lahecha the shachid la'achar shenigmar dina yehudas? Why would you learn this extra limud that this pasuk is coming to tell you that if you shachted it after Gemar Din, that you can't eat it? Maybe that's not what it's telling you. Maybe it's mutter. So what is the lo yachal first? The high lo yachal is hecha the sakle miskal. We need lo yachal to tell you that even if we're stone lo yachal. Why? It's an avela. Because maybe it's hecha the sakle miskal the asa. Why? Because of a chiddush that Rabbi Vo told us in the name of Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar, anytime the Torah expresses a nusach of an Isra Achila, by default it means Echad Isra Achila, the Echad Isra Hana. It always means automatically Isra Hana. So maybe that's what it's saying. Sakel Yisakel, but it's not only Asher Bachila because it's an Avela, but Lo Yechos Besarai, it's also Asher B'Hana. But how do you know to build to me this new halacha that if you shechted it, that it would still be Asher? Now the question is, how do you see in Lo Yachel an Isra Hana? So the Gemara is going to tell us in just a moment that by Nevela, when the Torah tells us about the Isra to eat a Nevela, the Torah tells us don't eat a Nevela, and the Torah adds on Leger Asher B'Sharecha Titnena V'Achal. Give it to the guy. I need advice what I should do with something I can't eat. You give it to a guy for a present. You give it to him for kratzma. The Torah is giving me advice. The Torah says no. The Torah is not giving me advice. The Torah is telling you that lo yachal by default is also an Isra Hana. So the Torah had to tell you by nevela. Here you're allowed to give it to a guy. Here is an exception where lo yachal does not include an Isra Hana. But everywhere else in the Torah where it says lo yachal, that includes an Isra Hana. So according to Rabbi Vo, the reason why it says lo yachal by Shar Nisko is not to tell you an Isra Achila. It's a nevela. It's to tell you Isra Hana. Until the Torah tells you that it's mutter b'ana, like the Torah did by Nevela. So Zok to Gemara, that's not logical to suggest that lo yachel by Shar Nisko is only to tell you an Isra Hana. You know why? When would the Torah use the word lo yachel to tell you an Isra Hana when it's also tell you an Isra Achila? So it uses lo yachel to tell you it's also b'achila, and by the way, it's also b'ana. If the Torah is telling us that the Isra Achila is there through the lo yachel, so we'll say it also means hana. Here we already know it's Asher B'Achila. So if the Torah is just trying to add an Isra Hana, the Torah should have said lo yahana. Because we're not trying to teach you an Isra Achila. So it's still extra. There's still something here that's extra. The Torah used a word of lo yachel, which is not the right word. So it must be telling me the same halacha that we suggested before, that if you shacht it before Bezdin has a chance to kill it, there's going to be an Isra Achila there. Inami, if you don't like the dir, I'll give you another dir. It says lo yachel, but it sticks in the word espesari. Lamali. What else shouldn't you eat? It says lo yachel espesari. It could have just said sakli sakli shar lo yachel. Espesari is extra. From there we learn gav de shachta kain basar. Even though you shafted it like you would normally prepare kosher meat, aser, it's still aser. So we know everything we need to know from the lo yachel, which means up until now we were using Baal Asher Nochi to tell me Isra Hana. I already know it from the lo yachel. So now I have the extra words Baal Asher Nochi, which we're going to get to shortly. But fact the Gemara, you're telling me that if you shecht it, it's still aser. Maybe if you shecht it, it's only still aser if you shecht it in a way where the shechita might be able to be considered some type of skila. How is that? Maskif law marzutra maybe if you use a very sharp rock and you shech it with a sharp rock, so the death came through a rock, so it's still a stickle skila V'shachad ba, the mechzik skila. It looks like a skila because a rock killed the animal. Maybe there is where the Torah says it's also Rana, because it would still be considered skila, not shchita. I will shach the sakin loy, but maybe if you use a knife to shecht it, there the Torah doesn't say it's also also. So tomorrow, where did you dream this up from? Midi sakin by right siv? The Torah never mentions anything about using a sakin to shecht. You can use anything to shecht. So why would you call shechting with a rock skila and not shchita? About this called shchita. No different than a knife. You can shecht with any type of sharp tool. A rock, with sharp glass, Zok the Gemara, the Hajj and the Nafkalan, Isra Achila, Visarano. So now that we learned both Isra Achila and Nisano, Tarvayum Mila Yochal, Hi Bal Ashar Naki Lamai also. What are you going to use Bal Ashar Naki for? So tomorrow to tell you that not only is the meat usher, but the hide is also usher. No, so Kedad Chamina Lo Yochal is Besara Iksiv. Besara Yasser, the Ayre Mutter, the Mashwon Bal Ashar Naki, he loses everything. Frankly, Gemara, the opposite side. We need Bal Ashar Naki to teach you other halachas. So how are you going to know that the hide is usher? To tell you that what if it's a tam? If it's a muad, then you actually pay kofer. If it's a tam, maybe just like if he damaged goods, you'd pay chatzi nezek. Maybe you should pay chatzi kofer. Kamashim Bal Ashar Naki, he's clean. He doesn't have to pay chatzi kofer. Or to make vlodas, we know if a human punches a pregnant woman and she miscarries, he has to pay the value of the vlodas to the father of the child or of the children. But if an animal does that, Bal Ashar Naki, there's no such liability. So if you use Bal Ashar Naki for that, how do you know that the Or is Asr? Hanas Ari Minolu. So tomorrow may Es Bisar. It says Layachel Es Bisarai, Es Atafel Bisari. The not only the meat, but the part that's an add-on to the meat, the Or is also the Idich. What if you don't learn the Mevladas? You don't learn Chatzi Koifer. So therefore, you're learning it out of Bal Ashar Naki. What is he going to do with the S? Tomorrow, turning on to Nun Zayin Amar Aleph.
Yes, Loidarish.
S Loidarish. He's not Darish, the Mashmois of the S. Kiditanya. Shimon Amtsuni, V'Amilo Nechemia Amtsuni, Hayidarish Kol Esen Shabbatayr. Use the dash in all the Esen in the Torah. Kivon Shegia, as Hashem Lekechatira. How could you say something is toughful to Hashem? How could you say there should be something that's comparable to the Rebbeinu Shalom that you should have year of? Pirish, he said, you know what? I'm backing out from all my essence. Amalei Talmidav, Rebbe, Kol Esen Shedarash to Matayelem. What are you going to do with all those beautiful drushes? Amar Lem, he told them, Kashem Shekibalti Schar Prisha, Kaf Kibalti Schar Prisha. The mysterious nefesh to concede that my drushes are incorrect is also something that I'll be rewarded for. But Tzibur Rabbi Akiva to save the day. The limit is Hashem Lekechatira. The rabbis told me the Chachamim. A Talmud Chacham is toughful to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And from a Talmud Chacham, you have to have hero. Gevalti. You know the famous Beres Olti story. He asked, "Favus izis as alle Rabbunim in the group." Want to start S. The rabbis told me the Chacham. S. Okay, I get the vach. Shkoyach.
Ja, Shekoyach. I get winter. I get a walk. Shkoyach.